Good morning all. This week is supposed to be wet and windy, and then wet and windy, and in between a bit of snow. But they did say Wednesday was going to be dry, and it is, and they said the sun would come out, and it hasn't, but it probably will. So it's a case of getting out today and grabbing the moment before all hell weather-wise breaks loose. Where are we heading? We're heading for Benefield. Upper Benefield, Lower Benefield. Another one that I drive through a lot, but I've never walked through. What have we got there? Loads and loads of sort of 1600s onwards, mostly sort of farmhouse type buildings and associated. There's some Second World War connections, which I hope to be able to find something that might still be remaining to remind us of Upper Benefield's role in the Second World War. And there's a castle. We've actually got a castle on a village walk, so that's right at the end of the video, but I've never seen that before. So yeah, there's going to be a castle at the end. We're not at Benefield yet. Where are we? I'll put this map up. Right, we're on a footpath that doesn't really go anywhere apart from to an old stately home, which we will be coming up to not too far in the distance, called Biggin Hall. Biggin Hall is not in Benefield, it's very close by, it's just outside of Oundle, but it has a connection, an important connection with Benefield, and I thought it was a good place to start off, so we will be there shortly. Quite a trek to kick this one off. Right, we're coming up to about as good as we're going to get here. I've come up to find Biggin Hall. Biggin Hall was, and still is, the home of the Watts-Russell family. That's a two double-barreled name, Watts-Russell. The house was built in about 1700, and the Watts-Russells have been here, I think, if not for all of that time, for most of it. But the guy of importance to us and to Benefield was a guy called Jesse Watts-Russell, who was, amongst other things, an MP. He was also a very wealthy man. He owned a couple of big stately homes, this one and one up in Derbyshire. And he inherited a lot of money from his father, who was something big in soap. And what I mean by that was he was based in London and he made a fortune trading soap around the globe and passed that fortune on to Jesse. And yeah, and he's got a generous chap, and in terms of his contribution to Benefield's history, he rebuilt their church in the 1800s, and we'll see the church towards the end of this trip. So rather than just mention his name at that point, I thought, well, I'll make an effort to try and get down and see if I can see his house, which is set back a very long way from this part. So I'm going to wait till I get to the top of this hill and then have a look. In the meantime, here's a picture of our Jesse, fine looking gentleman. Well, there you go, that's as close as we can get. Very, very tempting to walk across the fields here, but it's all private, so I'm not going to try and do that. I will put up a photograph in a minute from much closer up, but that is Biggin Hall. Built, as I say, around about 1700. Although it'll look a bit threadbare now. This was a magnificent tree-lined approach, as many of these sort of 18th century stately homes insisted on having. There's still trees there, but I'm sure it looks nothing like it did back in its heyday, but we'd be looking right down that tree-lined avenue to Biggin Hall. Heading back down the path now, we did pass on the way up, although I didn't film it, another old building known as Biggin Grange. Now, it's been around a long time, but my understanding of what Biggin Grange was is very, let's say, very sparse. There's very few references to it in any sort of historical journals apart from it existed. But the intriguing thing is it seems to have existed a long time before Biggin Hall did. There's even references going back to around the Domesday Book of there being a Biggin Grange. An initial one that was demolished in the 1200s and a new one that was built late in the 1200s. Now, the Biggin Grange that's there today, which is part of Biggin Grange Farm, it's an old building, I've seen pictures of it, but probably 1700. So this must be a third generation Biggin Grange, but I can tell you very little about it, apart from it seems to have a footprint in this area that goes back way beyond Biggin Hall. Has its own gatehouse, which we will walk past in a moment, and a bit further down the path I can actually get a shot of Biggin Grange, so I can show you what it looks like. That, I assume, is a gatehouse to Biggin Grange. Can't be anything else. The Grange itself is in the distance. You just cannot see it from here, but you can see it, as I say, further down the path. So I will get it. It's down there on the left. There you go. That's the best shot that I can get of Biggin Grange. There's some lovely old buildings surrounding it, old farm buildings, which must go back 400 years, 300 to 400 years, as I suspect Biggin Grange does, or this version of it. But they're not listed, nothing's listed. Don't know why, maybe a reason, but it's certainly old. But that's Biggin Grange. I'll put up a picture as well I've got, which is a bit closer up. As you can see, it's a nice building with plenty of age, without a doubt. I didn't do my usual intro piece where I tell you that Benefield is an Anglo-Saxon agricultural settlement like all the others. It's most definitely an agricultural settlement. Is it Anglo-Saxon? Possibly not. Possibly may just about make it back to just about pre-Norman, which I suppose is very, very late Anglo-Saxon. It is in the Domesday Book. Remarkably, it's in the Domesday Book as Benefield. It's usually, you know, names get distorted hideously back in the sort of 1086 time of the Domesday Book. But no, this is down as Benefield. So it was there then. So 11th century, it existed, but there's absolutely no references to Benefield prior to that. There is a hint of Anglo-Saxonism in the castle when we get there, or in the grounds of the castle, which we'll mention at a time, but really there's not a whole lot. So it may have, although Anglo-Saxons might have had a presence here, I think anything that looked remotely like Benefield of today, you'd probably have to wait until the Norman period, is my guess. So it's not a pure Anglo-Saxon agricultural settlement, but it is an agricultural settlement, as they all are. Okay, I've got back to my wagon now. I'm going to cheat. You can actually walk to Upper Benefield if you'd carried on the track we were going on, past Biggin Hall. Keep going for about another mile, swing left, you can walk round into Upper Benefield, but if you want to do the circular walk back to a car like I've got to do, it's about 9.5, 10 miles, and I don't have that in my legs today. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to jump in a wagon and I will see you again at the top end of Upper Benefield. Welcome to Upper Benefield. I'm going to put a map up now, which is an old US 8th Air Force site map. The bit marked in green, excuse the cars, bit marked in green is the road we're going to be walking down through Upper Benefield in a moment, but you'll see all these sites marked on here. These are the dispersed sort of airmen's sites from Deenethorpe Airfield, which is just up the road from here, and they hid their sites actually in the village rather than in woodland, which is quite unusual. And there's not a lot left. In fact, there's hardly anything left, but I'm going to try and find a footprint of some of these sites. This is where they put their air personnel when they weren't actually flying, to keep them safe. If the airfield got bombed, then hopefully the personnel would be safe because they wouldn't be on the airfield. So there's very, very little left. But this would have been a busy place in 1943 to 45, might be 42 to 45, can't remember the exact dates now, because it would have been rammed full of air personnel. So we're going to see if we can find something that says, yes, there is a sign that they were here. So I'm going to head up and we're going to look at site number 2 marked on that map. Hopefully at least I can find some foundations if we can get in. I might choose not to go in because it sounds like there's some activity there. It's private land, but we'll see if we can find, you know, just a smidgen of something. I'll have a look. Site 2, which is just, well, it would be on the right of us now behind this hedge, but there's a sort of entrance coming up which I hope to be able to have at least a peep through. Site 2 is a communal site, as you can see on the map. Communal sites were where people came together for communal activities, primarily eating. So there'd be dining halls in here. Some communal sites, excuse the traffic, some communal sites on other airfields would have things like gymnasiums, cinemas, anything to sort of amuse people when they were not actually working or on duty. I don't know what was here. I don't have a detailed site map, but I think dining halls you can guarantee. I'm not sure I'm going to dare go in because I think there's some activity in there and it is private, even though it doesn't say so. First thing you notice about this site is what I'm treading on, which is this bland, pale concrete that you get on all airfield sites. You ever see this anywhere on a trackway? You know it's something to do with an airfield, generally speaking. I'll sneak on a little bit. So there's nothing to see by way of buildings. Although I do have a vague recollection, there's a building at the back there, the brick building that's just peeping above other buildings. That is a survivor from this site, but I don't go in that far. Yeah, there's a van down there. I'm not going down there. That's where most of the buildings would have been. I think that's it. Well, we've got the base, we've got the ground, we've got the concrete, and that's it. A little something to remember the airmen by, I guess. Site 2, as you might have seen on that map, actually extends across the road for a short distance, but I don't think there's anything there, and if there is, I don't think there's any way I can get in there. It's a dense hedge. You can see peeping through here more of that concrete, which tells us there used to be a track here which would have gone into that other element of Site 2, which is in there, and as I thought, I can't get in, and it looks fully overgrown, so nothing missed there, I don't think. Right, heading back towards the village now, back to that old airfield map. Before we actually reach the buildings of Upper Benefield, on the right there is Site 8 and 9, which I'm going to try and find. Again, there won't be anything there, but we might be able to find something to prove that it exists. Access to Site 8 and 9 today is through Coronation Crescent, which wouldn't have been here, I don't believe, in the 40s, but I'm sure it wasn't. It'd just be fields with a trackway. There you go, down at our feet, our telltale concrete slab footings, which used to be the path down to the site. Grassed over down here, but it's still going to be there. Where this path hooks left here would have been the entrance to the site. Probably would have been some sort of gate post, picket post, call it what you like, to restrict entry. So this is about the end of that path. As you can see, there's nothing here. However, bumps and lumps, and they will be for sure foundations for the buildings, which would probably be primarily wooden buildings, but with concrete bases, and the foundations and those concrete bases will still be here. And then I'll put up this interesting picture, which is an aerial shot of this field, taken in the summer when it's a bit drier and things are a bit more parched. But from the air, you can see the unmistakable patchwork of tracks and building foundations from Site 8 and 9 still showing up, which, as I say, proves that the foundations are still there just under the surface. Old buildings will be coming thick and fast now, I warn you. That one on the right there is called Druids. Unusual name for an old building. It dates to 1791. I think there's a date stamp somewhere. But yeah, that's an old one. Number 13, unlucky 13, Druids. Must be a story behind that one. The wool barn, this was a wool barn apparently, dates to the middle part of the 1800s, where they stored wool. Just coming up to the delightful Townsend farmhouse, which dates to 1720. Very pretty building. Very nice. On the left there is Cherry Tree Cottage, dating to late 1700s. This village is packed full of wonderful houses. I wonder what that garage once was. Pretty sure it wasn't a garage in the 1700s. This one is Rose Cottage, I think it's called, which is even older. This one goes back to 1692. That's an old one. Very nice. And this next one, which is anonymous, as in doesn't have a name, I think it's number 16. Early to mid 1600s, deserves a name. Lovely porched doorway. Yeah, mid 1600s, that's a cracker. That's a cute one. That's Mulberry Cottage, early 1700s. Cute. Hidden behind this hedge is Ashley Farmhouse, or was Ashley Farmhouse, and that one goes back late-ish 1600s. Back to the Airfield map now. At the top there, sick quarters. We'd call it a hospital. Always wanted to know where this site is, and it's somewhere on the right here. Not sure we'll be able to get down there, but again, look at that concrete base. Let's stick our neck out, see what we can find. I'm not going to go far, but at least go down to the gate. Yeah, Airfield called it the sick quarters, but it's the hospital basically. Again, there's no buildings. He said, hesitating and looking to his left, but no, there's no surviving buildings that I'm aware of on any of these sites. Yeah, all you've got is foundations again. The buildings would have been over to the left, and they've all been levelled. Well, at least I know where it is now. I'm used to seeing buildings where there were two knocked into one. This is the opposite. This was one house once, but the Biggin Hall estate converted it into two. Built in the 1700s, turned into two in the 1800s, as I say, by the Biggin Hall estate, presumably for workers of the estate. That is Middle Farmhouse, or was Middle Farmhouse. Still is by the looks, Middle Farm. It's three different properties now. It used to be one, Biggin. Late 1700s build. These buildings on the right where there's some roof work going on, marked on old maps as the village stores. So if you know anything about, if you're in Benefield, not that long ago, because I think they were the village stores a few decades back. If you remember the village stores, give us a shout in the comments. But one of these buildings was the village stores. Whether it's the one under repair, more than possible. I don't think it was the house, it's a 1700s house. I think the stores were on the right and probably the ones being repaired for something else now. It's an early 1700s cottage, thatched cottage. Very nice. Very strange date stamp on that one. It says, it's upside down, but it says 1666 to the left of that upstairs window. I'm sure most of you will recognise this building coming up on the right. The Wheatsheaf, Benefield's one and only pub, or was. Converted to a house, back to a house 2018. I think it actually dates back, if I recall, to something late in the 1700s. It's probably built as a pub, to be honest with you, because above the door there is a sort of stone moulded Wheatsheaf, so I assume that was there when they built it. It's back to being a house now, a very nice house as well. So it'll never return to being a pub. The only thing remaining from pub days is that sign up there where the Wheatsheaf sign used to hang. I'll put a picture up. I'm sure most of you remember the Wheatsheaf anyway. On the left, date stamped very nicely between the upstairs windows, a 1651 Hatfield farmhouse. That is old. A lovely building. And another lovely building, K6 telephone box. And that's a rare one because it has a telephone in it. That takes me back. I wonder if it still works. Looks like it might. Return coins. What's a coin? I could never find any evidence on old maps that there was a post office in Upper Benefield, but I'm certain there was. And if there was, that's it. It's got to be. Screams out post office, doesn't it? Apart from the post box. And look at that post box. It's a GR King George post box. You don't see many of those. Very nice. It's nice how so many of the new buildings in Upper Benefield, like this one, are built to fit in with the older village. Makes a nice change. The last two houses of historical significance in Upper Benefield, late 1700s, early 1800s, there's two of them. Very nice. Nice chimney stacks as well. Nice ghost doorway in the side of that old barn. Part of Hill Farm, or was part of Hill Farm. And it's not listed. Well, it looks like it's been modified quite a lot. Rebuilt even. I don't think it's that old. Might be wrong. If it is, it's been massively done up, which is why it's not listed, I presume. Back on the busy A427. I told a lie back then. The last real house of historical significance is this one on the left, which is Nethertown Farmhouse, or used to be, I think it used to be called Hithertown Farmhouse. Dates to the mid 1700s, so definitely of significance. Very nice. This is the old medieval path, and no, it wasn't tarmacked in medieval times, but you won't find a map of Benefield going back hundreds of years that doesn't have this path on. It was the direct route between Upper and Lower Benefield. At one end of the path you got the pub, so if you were coming up from Lower Benefield, that was a good reason to use this one. And at the other end of the path as you can see in the distance, was the church. So the churchgoers of Upper Benefield would have been walking down here over the last 150 years or so, and before, but the church hasn't been around for too long, but the path has, and this is the fastest way between the two, unless you want to take on the A427, which I wouldn't recommend. That is Glapthorn Brook, which you won't be surprised to hear flows through Glapthorn. I think it joins the Nene somewhere near Cotterstock. I think just before you reach Cotterstock, or just before the Nene reaches Cotterstock, Glapthorn Brook channels into it. Plenty of water on it. Take a look at this Ordnance Survey map of where I am now. Swallow holes. That intrigued me when I saw that. Swallow holes reminds me of the Yorkshire Dales. Swallow holes are, in effect, holes in the surface that drop down to underground waterways, caves if you're up in the Yorkshire Dales, but we're not up in the Yorkshire Dales. So yeah, it just intrigued me. I have read references elsewhere on some old historical documents as well that this area used to flood and then the water would vanish, and not in the brook to my right, but the water would vanish down these swallow holes, which are like sink holes. So I can only assume we must be on some sort of bedrock which water easily permeates. Something like, oh, it could be limestone, I don't really know the geology around here, but yeah, swallow holes. That really intrigued me. I'm going to see if I can find one. I think that one is marked on the map actually as a swallow hole, but the obvious question, if that's a swallow hole, why is there water in it? Why hasn't it soaked away? It does look very rocky, if that's the right phrase. Around here it might make some sense. I'm no expert. I wasn't expecting to find a cave. But yeah, interesting geological elements for this part of the world. Just looking across the field again, there's an outcrop of very stony ground there, right at the bottom where water would gather. So yeah, probably indicates that there is some sort of way down for water, as it were. Right, just come along now to the last of the sort of airfield sites, and you know, don't laugh at me here. But this is, or if I can find it, this is the Airfield sewage farm. Doesn't look like a sewage farm now, and it was 80 years ago. But yeah, this was the Airfield's own sewage farm, and I've been here once before, about 20 odd years ago. Had a quick wander around. And it did intrigue me a little bit because it looked like something other than a sewage farm. It actually looked like a rubbish dump, and there's a lot of people who who are into their airfields get very excited about the idea of a rubbish dump on an old airfield, because that's where you can dig up and find various wartime artifacts. And there was no sign of that when I was there, but it kind of just didn't look right, and I wanted to get back and see if I can get back in. But it's very difficult because I've got to cross the brook, so if I can I will. But I'm going to go and have a look first. Well, I got in, very overgrown now, piles of building stone. Yeah, there's not a lot to see, but these sort of raised bits of ground just made me think last time I was here, this is a dump. This is where they've dumped the airfield rubbish. So if you're into your airfield artifacts, bottle collecting, this would interest you, but it's private, so it's up to you. I'm sure there's stuff under the surface of interest. Some of these holes suggest that somebody might have come down here before and had a dig. Yeah, there's bits and bobs here. This is a rubbish dump. Definitely a rubbish dump. That's cute. I would wager that's an old one. What does that say? It says tooth powder. There's a brand on it. Can't really see that one. Lions tooth powder. I'm going to have to look that one up. That's got to be from the wartime period. Lions tooth powder. You see that across the top? Brill cream. That's a Brill cream bottle. That's got to be Airmen. Yeah, Brill cream. Look at this. Spout off a teapot. Oops, it's another nice bottle. Unfortunately it's unmarked. Nothing on it. It's in good nick. I love places like this. You're going to have to drag me away. Bit of old canteen crockery there. Be nice to find something with a pattern on or something on. So look at the other side. Oh wow, that's what I wanted to find. There you go, in case you think I'm making this up. George VI, GR6, Grindley, but the date, 1945. Brilliant. I'm chuffed at finding that. Proof that this is indeed a rubbish dump for the airfield. It says New York at the bottom, and it says, what's that say at the top? I don't know. I can't read the top bit, but yeah, I'll check that when I get back. New York, American. Brilliant. I've got to get out of here. I'll be here in 2 hours, 3 hours time. There's just so much to pick up and have a look at. If I had a shovel, spade, I'd find a lot more stuff here. But like I say, it is private land, so I'm going to clear off, but it is what I always thought it probably was. And now I've proven it. When they cleared all the dispersed sites out, as they had to do at the end of their tenancy here in 45, 46, then there's obviously stuff they could burn, but there was other junk. They had to put it in a hole somewhere, and this was their hole. They just hit the sewage farm and just chucked it all in there, presumably with a landowner's permission, but it's all still here. Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to have to fight myself hard over the coming years not to come back here. I could enjoy myself here. That's great. Proved a point. Happy with that. Move on. Left or right? Left. Welcome to Lower Benefield. Some magnificent buildings down here, I warn you. This one is the Manor House. One of the Manor Houses. What a stunner. It's not listed. Why on earth not? Why on earth not? Probably my favourite building in either Benefields is Rectory Farmhouse, which they're coming up to, and it only dates to 1877. Again, another one of these that looks so much older, but it isn't. Dates to 1877. There are some farm buildings which people think are a bit older, but I'm not sure how that works to be older than the farmhouse. What a belter. The ledge on the end of that wall is where they used to put the milk churns for collection. It's a milk churn shelf. Saw one of these at Sutton, if I remember rightly. But yeah, it's where the churns used to go. The rather elaborately named Messuage farmhouse, 1700s, mid 1700s. Was remodelled in the 1800s and was a butcher's shop. Whether it's that building next to it or not, I don't know. But it was a butcher's shop. Time for a then and now shot. This one's from 100 years ago, early 1900s. And that's the same location today. Still recognisable at least. There's my 1700s building, 1730 date stamp on the side, and it used to be the post office. one of two actually that were here. I think this was the older one. And a red phone box down the side there. Yeah, 1730, former post office. That's Berkeley House. Early 1700s, probably been modified a few times, but what a grand house. Mid 1600s, Banhor farmhouse. That's an old one, very old one. Coming down to it, the unmistakable Smithy. The blacksmith built 1700, still going in the mid 70s. Long time blacksmith John Cullen from the village was featured in a newspaper article in 1976 as still going as the village blacksmith. So I don't know when it finished. Still there today as the old forge, but even without the sign on the door, you'd spot that as a smithy anytime. And next door used to be the village shop and post office. More recent than the previous post office. Don't think that's been closed for too long. A lovely unspoilt part of Benefield down here. Most of these buildings are not listed, so I can't tell you too much about them, but they're certainly old. That one's got a date stone of 1845. Very nice. Oh, there's one for sale here. Might buy that one. On an old ordnance survey map, this land to the left here had a sheep wash on it. I don't think it's still there now. I know it's not. Whether there's any signs of it, I don't know. Would be on that land there, really. Can't see any sign. There is some stonework down there. May well have had something to do with it. Probably was down there actually. There's a hole in that wall. I would say that's something to do with the sheep wash. Another old picture here from about 100 years ago. And I'll turn around in a second and show you what it looks like now. There is pretty much the same shot today. Just been chatting with an old work colleague of mine who lives at that house. So if I don't include it, he's going to have a go at me. He bought it as two derelict cottages, knocked it into one, and what a fantastic job. He's just got to sort the chimney out now, so I'm allowed to complain about that. That's his next project. Hope Cottage. Good job. Just noticed on Messwage farmhouse, it's got a dragon on the roof. Don't see many of those. There you go. Very unusual church for my travels. There was a church here dating back to the 1300s, definitely. And then I think it was 1847, this was completely rebuilt apart from a small part of the original. And it's completely rebuilt by Jesse Watts Russell, who we bumped into at Biggin Hall, as it were, at the start of the video. I mean, he didn't build it, his architect built it, but he paid for it. And it's a rather grand affair for such a small village, really. But yeah, it was all down to Jesse Watts Russell. In fact, the whole, you know, it's a kind of, there's a lot of Watts Russell items inside the church, which we won't see. But yeah, why not? He built the damn thing. I'm sure the villagers were very grateful and still are. It's all Victorian. A Victorian church, no less. A lovely war memorial. Around about 1920 that would have been erected to remember the fallen from the village in the Great War. Very nicely done. A lot of brave young lost men from the Plowright family. 1, 2, 3, that must have been tragic. Alfred, Joseph and Ernest Plowright all lost their lives. Pretty devastating. In memory of the men of Benefield who gave their lives for England, 1914 to 1919. Bless them all. Intriguing door. That's definitely not one I would get through without taking at least my head off. Just move around the back of the church now. The most substantial part of the original 1300s church would be the chancel on the right, although it's been modified a lot. Yeah, some of the stonework on that one belongs to the original sort of medieval church. The rest of it, apart from, I haven't been round to the tower. I think the bottom of the tower might also be part of the original church. The rest of it, Victorian. That's the foot of the tower. A lot of people have said the bottom part of the tower is part of the 1300s church. I don't know how far up you go. Probably below that window up above. Probably about where we are now. Somewhere there. It looks like the masonry is slightly different above there. And the rest would be Victorian. Heck of a tower. This chest tomb, according to records, dates back to late 1700s, so it's actually older than the bulk of the church. Obviously it would have been here with the previous church, but yeah, it predates most of the building that now towers above it. Always a bit sad to see gravestones that seem to be detached from their plots and just propped up against the wall. I'm pretty sure that's the case with this one, which is a lovely stone. See if I can find something out about this chap. That's if I can read any of it at all. Bernard Thomas, the beloved son of George and Fanny. (1918) seems to be the date. Could be Great War related. I'll have a go. Might be a bit difficult. If I find anything out, I'll put it at the bottom of the screen. Some horizontal grave slab type memorials here with their traditional crosses on them. They will predate the church as well, or at least predate the current church. Loving memory of a dear husband, Percy Gadsby, Plowright, died August 6th, 1961, aged 67 years, gone but not forgotten. I assume part of that tragic family that lost those kids at the Great War. To complete the story of the church, I should mention it's widely accepted that prior to this Victorian church, obviously there was a 1300s church which I've mentioned, but it's widely believed that prior to that there was another church, probably an Anglo-Saxon church, and therefore a wooden church. But there seems to be considerable supporting opinion from different historians on that one, so we've sort of had three levels of churches, of which this is Mark III, as it were. But there's been a church on the site for a very long time, over 1,000 years. Guardians of the main door. Interesting wall here that separates the church from Manor farmhouse. It has embedded, well, they look like gravestones to me. That has a date of 1716 on it. Can't read that one. Unusual to have gravestones in a wall. I suspect they're very old. Again, I can't quite read it, but it looks old. Completely worn. Oh, I'm trying to get through to the big finale of the video. Well, it's not really, but I mentioned at the beginning that there was a castle, Benefield Castle. Well, it's next to the church. I can see where it was, but I didn't realise the location is in the grounds of Manor Farm, and I can't actually get through to it. I thought I could just roam around and have a look. I'm going to get some pictures, rest assured, one way or the other. But it's not a castle as in a big stone turreted drawbridge castle that we all sort of think of when we talk about castles. This is a mound with a moat around it. The castle sat on top, and it came in the form of a stone wall that went around the top of the mound, and then inside that, people are not too sure, but it wasn't a stone building. I'm absolutely certain of that. I am 99% sure they were wooden buildings, and the most important of the wooden buildings was a manor house, and it's a kind of fortified manor house, to use the phrase, and I don't think it was anything grander than that, but it was a castle, and it was what they called a castle, and it was built in the 1100s, and it was gone by the end of the 1200s. It didn't last long. The people that sort of lived here were, well, one bunch got into debt, and that got them into trouble, so they were hoofed out. The next mob couldn't resist going out and pillaging nearby villages. They even had a pop at Biggin Hall at one point and stole some stuff. They nicked some stuff from Oundle, and basically the king at the time got seriously miffed off with these lot. And cut a long story short, it wasn't that long a story, less than 200 years, he said, "I've had enough, level it." And I think by 1280, that sort of time, it had gone. which is why I'm pretty sure it was all wooden, because if it was stone there'd still be something still standing. I'm told in the 1700s the stone wall around the top, there were parts of that still there, but that's all gone now. It is just a grass bank really, where the castle once stood, but it is a castle, and it's officially one of 14 and only 14 castles within Northamptonshire, so it's a worthy claim to fame that Benefield has a castle, but not quite as you might expect when you see or hear the word castle. Right, I'm going to try and find some footage now, so bear with me. Well, there's the mound in the background, quite large. As I say, there was a moat running around it. You can just see on the right. I think he's made that, someone told me, into his own little pond, but it's actually part of the moat. Yeah, the castle sat on top of that mound, or the collection of buildings with a wall around, to be more precise. That's it. That's all you're going to see. Benefield Castle. Very frustrating that I can't get in there, sadly, but if it's part of somebody's private garden, then lucky them and unlucky us. It's an interesting building in the corner of the churchyard. Don't really know what to make of that. Yeah, interesting. I wish I could tell you something about that, but I can't. I said earlier I'll tell you a bit more about the manor house that was here. It's actually Manor Farm as it's known now, but it's believed in the 1500s it was the manor house here. And it's also believed by some historians that some of the masonry, some of the stonework from the castle, and I presume I mean the wall of the castle, because I don't think there's stonework inside it personally, but some of that stonework from the wall was included in the build. So whether it was robbed when it was built in the 1500s, I don't know. I can't give you any more detail, there just isn't any detail out there, but these are comments made by other historians that they believe some bits of what was known as Benefield Castle lives on within that building. Doesn't look that old, but there are buildings around the back that I can't see. Looks like an old pump there. Indeed it is. Different to any I've seen before, but it must be a pump. Very nice. Very old as well. I think I want it known that I think I'm the first person to have walked through this gate on the way up, because they were, I'm pretty certain, installing it, and it smells new. Yeah, and it looks new. I want to be remembered for that. I ought to engrave on it that I was the first person in this year of 2024 to walk through that gate. Probably wouldn't go down too well if I did. Sun's coming out now as soon as the walk finishes. That's quite nice out there today. I don't think it's got much above about 4 or 5 degrees, but it's a nice day. It's going to go downhill after today, but I don't mind. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed something from Upper and Lower Benefield. A lot of history here, you know. I find it quite daunting because you know, I bumped into a couple of people on this walk and they just went off talking about history, and it just made me realise, you know, my level of understanding of the history here is quite, let's just say it's quite lightweight. They just know so many layers of history that it kind of makes me feel like I haven't done it justice, a sort of a dummy's guide to the history of Benefield, but it's not. You know, if I went into too much history, I think it would get a little bit too boring. I'd like to think I've got at least 90% of it right today. It is a fascinating place. I thoroughly enjoyed, I know I should be enjoying the buildings and the 1600s and the castles and the church. I loved those airfield sites, and I particularly loved that sewage works and what I proved to be an airfield dump. All those wonderful bits and bobs down there. So great fun, I've enjoyed it. Hope you found something that you found enjoyable, and as ever, thank you very much for joining me on the walk. I know I've got some things wrong, so if you think you know better, and I'm sure you do, please drop a comment or two underneath the video on Peterborough Images or on YouTube, or just drop any comment, good or bad. It's just nice to know there's people out there. And as ever, that little red box in the corner of the screen, please click on it and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. If I can get to 1,000 subscribers, I get all sorts of opportunities to do more with this channel. They won't let me do it until I get to 1,000, and I've only got about 930 only. It's a lot, and I'm very, very grateful. But if you haven't already subscribed, please do. It costs nothing, it does nothing, it just gives me something that is very, very useful to me. But aside from that, thank you very much, as I say, and I will see you again next time out.